I am a captain and I will start this document with several claims supported by undeniable evidence. I have located lands that were hidden from us, several massive continents lying beyond our known world, fully mapped, and I have the means to set sail on several vessels I own as soon as I secure crews, including a second captain. Allow me to show you something no one else can. If you see it in full context, what I will show you will repeatedly take your breath away, including that the hidden lands surrounding us are fully built up with architecture and infrastructure of the old world, exactly as we see it all around us. That the flat Earth model is deliberately incorrect and designed to deceive you. No ice wall exists and I can prove it. Everything you think you know about Tartaria is wrong. I have deciphered the entire essence of humanity's last great reset across the world. And it ended only in 1860, which is indisputably proven and fully explains the aftermath of the Muddy Flood. Australia and its natives are not what you think, and our entire recent timeline has been fabricated. After decades of personal research in the rabbit hole, separating truth from mere conspiracies and fantasies on a successful spiritual journey, I took all relevant individual research items and pieced them together. I did not just put things side by side but connected them. One topic only makes sense in connection with the previous, all in context. But only through this can any of us see the big picture, thanks to the connection of knowledge. If a picture is worth 1,000 words and our eyes see 1,000 lies, you will see it and believe. This document was not created to try to wake up the mindless, non-player characters around us. They are not programmed to acknowledge or question the world around them. This document is for you. Hence the small number of truly enlightened human beings in this world. I don't want to play Morpheus here, but you have felt it your whole life. You've always been the weird ones. You've always known that something is simply not right with this place. You have followed your senses, intuition, heart, common sense, and what your eyes tell you. I will never tell anyone what to do or think. I can only guide you. But if you are truly enlightened, you are more than capable of thinking for yourself and resonating with the truth. And for that reason, while I will move as quickly as possible from topic to deliver my main points and show you your reality, I will present sufficient evidence for every claim I make along the way. Anyway, I came here to chew gum and kick ass and I just ran out of gum. So it's time to put on sunglasses. I decided to significantly shorten this part of my already long and information-packed document. I'm wasting 25 minutes of enlightened people's time and adding unnecessary evidence about the shape of the earth beneath our feet and the heavens above us. These are basic facts, the complete foundation, but necessary for you to understand your reality. If you still believe at this point that Neil deGrasse Tyson is an intelligent man, and we live on a globe spinning at 1,000 miles per hour while orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, while the sun orbits the Milky Way at 447,000 miles per hour. While the Milky Way is rotating around some other pseudoscience that it can't even explain. A rotating globe with magical gravity that holds bent oceans while a shot of rum doesn't even rattle the Kraken. And I'm not even talking about large lakes and Olympic pools. With fake CGI, a drawn universe, drawn planets, stars, drawn space stations, astronauts in space, drawn satellites with pathetic reality, Elon's shitty drawn car, Freemasons landing on plasma moon in tinfoil ships, upside-down umbrellas and cringy clip art drawings from the moon. If at this stage of awakening you still believe that, go to the man who has enlightened the most souls in the world, Mr. Rice Dubai, and come back to this presentation when you start acting like adults, or go back to watching funny cats, chasing dwarfs over porn, and solving 9/11 for a few more decades. I don't care. Regarding the architecture of the old world, it is clear that these amazing buildings were not built by our recent ancestors in our fabricated timeline. Once I put together the previous world resets, which I will explain in detail, I was able to distinguish 4 main architectural timelines, separated by one or more global catastrophes. These 4 timelines summarize like ancient architecture, massive constructions of massive stone massively oversized in every direction, some heavily weathered, eroded, melted, and even destroyed beyond recognition. Buildings of the second timeline, which I will call Old World Architecture, which is practically everything that artificial intelligence in the story writes was established in the 18th and 19th centuries, at a time when, as I prove, only 10% or less of the previous world's population lived. Events that buried this world in mud. The third architectural timeline will not make sense until I explain the past reset, but it is everything built by civilization before the reset. And again, I can prove to you that the civilization from the previous timeline did not build ancient architecture or old world architecture, which are all those rounded castles with battlements on top, mostly damaged by war or falling apart. But do not confuse them with the much more impressive old world castle constructions, or with the ancient star-shaped fortresses around the world. Less skilled people from pre-reset times built much more primitive half-timbered houses, crooked walls all over the place. Massive, thick-walled with high thermal insulation and thatched roofs. Like their predecessors, they also built many houses from red bricks. They are not as impressive as buildings from the old world, but they are still very nice, sturdy structures, and all those row houses. And the fourth architectural timeline is ours, which is everything from 1860 onwards. Ugly, boring, lifeless boxy skyscrapers, apartments and houses built from temporary, fragile and cheap materials or from steel and glass. Proving that the official version of history is fake is easy in supposedly new countries like America, Canada and Australia. Countries that should not have old world ancient buildings, yet they have them all. This channel is called My Lunch Break. This channel deals with exposing architectural lies and that our historical narrative was written by artificial intelligence. We are told that the United States of America was founded in 1776. Shortly after, 16 years later, the stock market opens. And as we talked about earlier, this is exactly where evolution, God knows why, finally starts working. And the whole world suddenly becomes so intelligent and starts creating flying machines, engines, telephones, trains, televisions, and everything else. Believing this is absolute madness. Then we have Australia appearing on the scene in 1901. The main problem is that we have buildings from the previous civilization standing here staring us straight in the face. Buildings that today, in 2023, we no longer build. Cities like Budapest, which have cafes, parliament buildings, and chocolate museums that look like from a movie. We have identified nearly 100 stories about fires where buildings supposedly built in the 19th century, which obviously originate from the old world, were completely destroyed by fire even though they are mostly made of stone, which is not flammable. This is the beginning of the awakening of the masses, understanding this enormous historical lie and realizing that just before us existed a previous civilization that is no longer here. Where did they go, or what exactly happened that made them disappear from this place? That is what we want to know. They left us all their buildings here for us to see. In my opinion, they left all their technology here and those individuals who are said to be so smart and whom evolution just struck in the eyes. They never created these things. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and so on. In my first 37 episodes, you will find hundreds of inconsistencies in the official explanation, and we have only just begun. They managed to build the Basilica of St. Mark in 4 years, from 828 to 832, but they didn't have a light bulb. Spare me, they built the interior by candlelight. Oh, and don't forget it will last forever. Unlike anything we build today, even though it was a time when they didn't even know how to make paper, it's unbelievable that once you understand it you cannot unsee it. You can see it very clearly in almost every city in the world. This past civilization had much more technology that has not yet been returned to us. They returned cars, trains, airplanes, television and mobiles, light bulbs and computers, the internet and electric tools. All major movies were refilmed. They know what we like. Refrigerators, cameras, GPS, video games, all in the last 300 years. In my opinion, as I said, they had all this technology, including AI. I am beginning to find the same narrative too often around the world. Now I lean towards the idea that AI most likely created all these crazy, ridiculous stories for each of these buildings. The repetition of plots and the repetition of characters reveals all this. How long has AI, or specifically these things like ChatGPT, actually been here? Do you think this is the first time? I certainly do not think so. Many of these old-world buildings were built in a style similar to those ancient ones, and the builders obviously had a high level of knowledge and technology to create these masterpieces. But all these buildings from this second civilization and timeline are just cosmetic fakes compared to them. Except for the obvious old-world buildings made of red bricks, when it comes to these buildings that look like stone, they are all actually built from red bricks. There is a good reason for this, which I will get to later, but as you see, any damaged old-world building is only clad on the outside and inside, either with thin stone slabs that are meant to look like massive stone, or they use cast geopolymer plaster, something like a high-grade cement that hardens over time. Here they are demolishing a perfectly preserved old-world building. Although it is painful to watch such videos, most show us clear signs of the construction methods used to build them. As you can see, this tower is built from massive stone blocks, or maybe not. Once it falls apart, you see it's just a building of red bricks with a thin layer of stone cladding. In places like the attic, they didn't bother with internal stone cladding because no one would see it. If you didn't realize it before, now you will always notice it when looking at old-world buildings. And it does not diminish how amazing these buildings are. Their technology is beyond anything in the modern era. Which brings us to another piece of the puzzle, commonly known as Antiquitech. Ancient civilizations of the Old World knew how to harness the energy that is all around us, called ether, the fifth element that was kept hidden from us. And the compound of carbon-14 and iron oxide in the red bricks used to build these old-world buildings functioned as a giant antenna and even retained a charge. In 1887, the Michelson-Morley experiment attempted to prove their theory on the existence of ether. Unfortunately, they never succeeded due to their primitive technology at the time. Almost 100 years later, in 1986, the U.S. Air Force repeated this experiment and scientifically proved the ether field existed. The results were published in the scientific journal Nature in August 1986 under the headline Special Relativity Nature, Volume 322, page 590. For the cult, there is no money in it when energy is free, clean, and sustainable, so now they simply deny the existence of ethers. These are not religious symbols. When that cult created its religions to control and divide, they simply appropriated these symbols because they were everywhere on the buildings that were designated as their sanctuaries. You will notice that all original Antiquitech had these copper spheres and antennas in the shape of corresponding symbols. This is the Old World symbol for ether, a symbol for gathering ether. This is the Old World symbol for Mercury. These copper spheres contained mercury inside. Only a small amount was needed, but with a simple magnet combined with a source of energy like ether, this vortex would create its own magnetic field. Unfortunately, over the years they replaced this technology with their cheap wooden crosses. That's why most of these buildings have copper grounding wires running from the top of the antenna to the ground. And no, it's not because of lightning strikes. The church will only have problems if this technology was removed. Skilled builders of these masterpieces accounted for lightning even before construction. Moreover, they were designed to harness energy and last forever. Does anyone really think that our dumbed-down society had to come to save these buildings that are probably thousands of years old? The last part of this topic, and something that will make more sense later, is the greenhouses of the Old World. They used geothermal technology and also ether for growing supercrops unaffected by external influences. Greenhouses large enough to feed entire cities. Similar technology has become popular in recent years under the name electroculture, a technology that uses electric currents from ether to promote plant growth. Watch the glass, but now look at the metal, the steel. Isn't that incredible? The ancient Old World buildings we today call cathedrals and churches were not just power plants. They were like hospitals and clinics of the Old World that emitted healing frequencies. By using the same techniques in cymatics and testing the frequency of church bells ringing, they create the same patterns as the beautiful rose windows you see all around the building itself. Subtitles created by Johnny X. Technology taken from the ancients. Ether and bell frequencies would affect the molecular structure of water. It would be like drinking and bathing in life energy. The juice of life, the fountain of youth. These carvings were not just decoration. It is technology. The glass would use the electroradiation of the sun and moon through the geometric pattern of the window, and the light inside then takes the form of that frequency. Each frequency contains its own geometric pattern. Passing light through the geometric pattern heals the human body and soul. It regenerates while vibrating at the same frequency. These buildings also contain the most powerful sound instrument ever created: brass organs and pipes. Stunning masterpieces. The organ would heal your organs. That is why ancient civilizations and Old World civilizations lived longer than us and grew taller than us today. They removed our energy source, our mojo. Unfortunately, most of these original bells and organs have been removed, replaced, or never used for their intended purpose. You will find that any of these giant bells remaining today are deliberately damaged. And the story of their destruction is that the bells were removed worldwide and melted down for the production of bullets, weapons, bombs, and other military equipment. By that cult to give them to us for mutual murder, demonic as always. In 1955, Rockefeller Foundation, with the support of the International Organization for Standardization, changed the tuning of instruments and tones to 440 Hz. Dissonant. consciously suppressive, negative, inharmonic, destructive, chaotic, and harmful tone of frequency and vibration. I would recommend changing your entire music playlist from 440 Hz to widely available 432 Hz or 528 Hz. You will feel the benefits. We are led to believe that we are just dumb monkeys that need to learn to speak, but even real monkeys are born with the ability to communicate with their own kind. But stupid people, we have to learn to speak, read, write, spell, and conjure with the word magic of the cult and their twisted languages that we all speak. But as always in reality, the highest beings do not have to learn how to communicate. That's why they gave us all these separated languages and demonic religions so that we could not communicate with each other. So that we could hate, kill, divide, and conquer. The best research on this subject I have seen was by Mr. Dave Murphy in his documentary called The Language of Creation. Dave connected the ancient dead language he called Paleo-Hebrew, the original language, the language of God, and probably the language of ancient nations. And I hear many of you saying now, Captain, did you just say Hebrew? Are you one of them? No, Paleo-Hebrew has nothing to do with Hebrew or Jews. Hebrew has nothing to do with Jews at all, but if you want to know more about it, check out Dave's video. Paleo-Hebrew is a pictorial language of images, sounds, and mouth vibrations, exactly like what is called ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Many other creatures in this world use a pictorial language called echolocation. Whales, dolphins, bats, lemurs, rats, birds, and many more. They don't just make sounds, they send and receive images and sounds. A cymatic experiment was conducted with dolphins using a technique called cymoglyphs, which are patterns representing dolphin language, similar to hieroglyphs. This particular experiment involved Jim McDonough and a dolphin named Amia. Jim entered Amia's tanks and let her do her thing, that clicking, recorded the feedback frequency, and through cymoglyphs they obtained this image. And for Amia, this image would be in full high resolution with sound. And that's why when this frequency was played back to another dolphin with several different people in the tank, that new dolphin was able to recognize Jim from the others. As for humans, we are born with the ability to co-communicate, but we are taught away from our own language so much that we do not even understand our own children when they are born and begin to speak to us. The way I managed to find exact dates and events that led to the last catastrophic reset of this world, all societies living in it, their economies, the massacre of about 90% of the world's population, and the takeover by the same parasites who rule this world to this day, was frankly quite simple. And I would like to explain how because it will later help you understand my main discoveries. I have long studied the cartography of the old world. I have been living on the ocean on my sailboat for 5 years. Navigation, marine maps, and reading maps are part of my daily life as a sailor, and I taught bushcraft and survival skills including navigation for 10 years, so I would call myself an expert in this matter. While comparing maps of the old and new worlds, I noticed several major differences between them. The first was that no old world map shows ice anywhere, let alone at the North Pole or any ice on the continents surrounding our world. But around 1900 in the 20th century, ice began to appear on world maps. The official version now claims that ice was always in those areas, probably like a trillion, quadrillion ice, right? There is no doubt about that. In the north and the territory known as Antarctica, there is ice that is rapidly melting. Most manipulated historians would simply say that the cartographers who made these ancient world maps were just primitive fools and liars with a vivid imagination, right? Fortunately for me, I know better. When you have a map, for example Urbano Monte 1587, which is over 400 years old, but its drawings are so accurate that I used it today for navigation in the oceans. I know that these cartographers of the past are much more knowledgeable and intelligent than most people today. The second difference between old and new world maps was the shapes of continents, and I will quickly show you what I mean. So here we have South America in modern times, and here we have South America before its naming in 1587. As you can see, it doesn't look quite right. Nowadays it looks more like this. Here is Chile and Lake Titicaca in modern times, and again here is Chile and Lake Titicaca in 1587. Both match perfectly. But as you can notice from the difference on the 1587 map, Chile is about 1,000 miles inland, but today Chile is on the coast. And as you can see, due to the location of Chile relative to Lake Titicaca, Chile has not moved anywhere recently. Both match new and old. Now a simple manipulated mind would come to the same conclusion. The creators of old world maps are idiots. I had a more realistic hypothesis. Between 1587 and today, there was a worldwide catastrophic event that caused massive earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, and a rise in sea levels. Volcanoes erupted, causing plumes of ash that shaded the sun and triggered a global little ice age. An event of mass depopulation when the powerful took the opportunity for a worldwide takeover of power and the removal of our real historical timeline. And I know what you're thinking, Captain, were you drinking seawater again? Nothing like that happened in our recent history. A few years later I needed provable answers, so I opened a search engine and asked a simple question. What was the average temperature in the 18th century? The average temperature at the beginning of the 18th century was significantly lower because this period was part of the Little Ice Age. There is a huge amount of evidence and information about this Little Ice Age if you ask the right questions and use the right keywords, but for now it just spat out this temperature graph for me. Do you see it? Between 1600 and 1700 there is a huge fluctuation called the Little Ice Age. Don't be fooled by their words, they're magic. There was nothing little about this ice age. Indoctrination tells you that these ice ages happen every 10 or 20 years, 1,000 years, and they last for thousands of years. But in reality, at least in recent history, these ice ages occur approximately every 400 to 700 years and last about 200 to 300 years. Over and over. They go like clockwork. The Little Ice Age reached its coldest point during the 70-year period between 1645 and 1715, known as the Maunder Minimum. As you can see, roughly between 1630 and 1700, the sun was shaded. There are several theories about how this ice age arose, but in my opinion only one is logical. Volcanic eruptions began sporadically appearing around the Pacific roughly since 1611 and caused volcanic dust to rise into the sky. According to some verified reports from Europe, this fallout overshadowed the sun for a whole year from one of many eruptions. This caused a drop in global temperatures on many occasions documented during this period. 3 particularly cold intervals occurred. One started around 1650, another around 1770, and the last in 1850, each separated by periods of mild warming. Massive earthquakes during this time caused tsunami waves worldwide, combined with extreme weather, strong winds, and torrential rains. Together with freezing temperatures, this alone killed hundreds of millions of people. Now with a huge amount of verified reports from this period about volcanic activity and catastrophic earthquakes measuring 8 and 9.6 on the scale, the highest degree, called great earthquakes which cause catastrophic damage and loss of life over extensive areas. An allegedly rare phenomenon, yet I counted approximately 130 of these rare events during this period. Returning to my hypothesis which I wrote years before I asked the right question, tsunami do not explain worldwide permanent floods and the loss of vast land areas, so I asked another question: what was the sea level height in the year 1700? As you see, directly related to the Little Ice Age, the sea level began sharply rising around 1745. Do I believe now in the accuracy and truthfulness of this graph? No, of course not. But even if this sea level rise were 10 times higher, it would not explain the enormous land losses that were globally acknowledged. That is, acknowledged when you know the truth. When you take numerous reports from all over Great Britain and Europe that carefully describe extreme weather, torrential rains that lasted 200 years and in some cases reports of non-stop rain lasting for years, one catastrophic disaster after another. Imagine what that would do to the ground beneath their feet and to their crops. But all that waterlogged, flooded soil would cause not only rising sea levels but also massive landslides on land, which explains the aftermath of the muddy flood that buried this world. A topic I will soon elaborate for you. The reported permanent loss of large territories, such as when the Danes, Germans, and Dutch lost huge parts of their coastline. Another example on the other side of the world in Jamaica. On June 7, 1692, Port Royal in Jamaica was hit by a massive earthquake of magnitude 8, which caused the city to sink into the sea and resulted in approximately 5,000 deaths due to tremors and the consequent tsunami. 2/3 of Port Royal sank into the sea, with many buildings collapsing due to soil liquefaction. The ground opened and swallowed many people. Most of the 2,000 buildings in the city were destroyed and many ships in the harbor capsized. Even factoring in all documented sea level rises, torrential rains, floods, muddy floods, and tsunamis, it does not explain why all these countries report massive land loss and obvious differences between old and new world maps. as I showed you with the example of Chile, which is now on the coast. They even admit this area suffered significant coastal losses due to the Little Ice Age, but for this there must be a more logical explanation. Something is missing, so I asked another correct question. Can land break off from continents and slide into the ocean? Can land break off from continents and slide into the ocean? Yes, land can break off from continents and slide into the ocean, a process often associated with landslides or tectonic plate movements. However, this is usually a gradual process, not a sudden event. Well, tell that to the Jamaicans in 1692 when their city collapsed into the ocean within minutes, causing all those deaths. Continents can break apart much more easily than previously assumed. Shocking, isn't it? These findings explain the origin of flat weakened zones known as remote faults, which form at depths of 10 to 15 kilometers and were previously unexplained. Their conclusion is that volcanic activity during the general crisis of the 17th century played a key role in shaping the then environment and social landscape, and contributed to widespread instability and conflicts. Before I show you some absolutely disgusting stomach-turning atrocities that were a direct consequence of this Little Ice Age, I must say that from such extensive study of this massacre, I felt physically sick for a week afterward. It was that bad. But before that, I must explain this last part about the Little Ice Age before Boots and minions try to deny the facts and truths I'm telling you here. When you go to controlled Wikipedia, it tries to downplay the Little Ice Age not only by its name but also by what they write there. The Little Ice Age was a period of regional cooling, especially pronounced in the North Atlantic region. It was not a true global ice age. What they mean is that it was not a worldwide event and did not cause ice formation in the north or south. But as always, all evidence points to the opposite. Even indoctrinated historians reject this narrative. He of course dismisses the Little Ice Age as episodic, insignificant, and I quote, predominantly independent regional climate changes, rather than a globally synchronous increase in glaciation. End quote. But if glaciers began rapidly advancing worldwide in the 14th century, and then rapidly retreating from the 19th to the 20th century, it takes a special determination to call this a regional hiccup. And exactly this resistance to the concept of the Little Ice Age is the kind of denial we're talking about here. And there are dozens of scientific papers proving it was a worldwide event that froze our then unfrozen lands. The study by Erica J. Hendy in the South Pacific with a 420-year history of isotopic ratios measured in samples from the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. The results of Hendy's extensive study indicated that salinity was higher from the mid-16th century to the mid-19th rather than in the 20th century. This proved that temperatures in these southern areas were significantly lower during the Little Ice Age. To fully understand the horrors and direct consequences of the recent Ice Age, you must enter the secular and secret code name, the General Crisis of Humanity or the General Crisis of 1700. And again, don't be fooled by that bland name. This is not because I associate the Little Ice Age with the General Crisis of Humanity. That narrative connects them. And this time they are not deceiving you. They do not want you to have this knowledge. These poor souls inherited this world from ancient civilizations just like we have, and just as the children of your children will inherit what remains after our reset is complete. Impact of the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age did not only cause crop failures but also contributed to wider societal transformation. Climate change pressures accelerated the transition to more modern economic systems as traditional feudal structures began to collapse under the pressure of these crises. The general crisis of the 17th century included widespread famine due to crop failures, amplified by the Little Ice Age, which caused harsh weather and lack of agricultural products. This led to a significant population decline and social unrest in various regions including China and Europe, unusually cold and lack of summer rainfall. Wars and revolutions disrupted all agricultural production. High taxes made it difficult for people to maintain their livelihoods. Many regions suffered considerable losses of life due to hunger, disease, and malnutrition, including the Black Death, which was exacerbated by the Ice Age conditions. Food shortages led to uprisings and increased crime as desperate people searched for resources. In Paris, France, during civil unrest from 1648 to 53, 7 years of very heavy rains followed. The population decline there in the summer of 1649 reached 1/3. Villages around Paris lost 1/4 of their inhabitants. No one could cope with such suffering. That is 1/3 of the population of cities like Paris dead after 1 year of famine. Another famine in France between 1693 and 94 killed 10% of the entire French population. France alone experienced 111 great famines during the 2 centuries of the Little Ice Age. During famines in Britain and Europe, cannibalism was reported as a desperate survival measure. And I read reports that this happened worldwide until the late 19th century. Survival cannibalism was not only legalized, but people were even forced to it face to face with hunger. Where do you think the phrase "eat your own children" comes from? In one testimony I read, the dismembered body of a 3-year-old girl was seen. Some parts were boiled in a pot on the fire while others had apparently already been consumed. The girl's mother insisted the child died a natural death. They resorted to cannibalism, eating corpses, deliberately killing others, mostly children, for consumption. 2 factors put children at special risk. They were easier to abduct and kill than adults, and their meat was often considered tastier. People resorted to eating their own children due to hunger. Records from all over Europe show that every 4th child died before their first birthday, and half did not live to 20 years old. I heard stories of mothers taking their children into freezing forests and leaving them there to freeze because they could not feed them. Malnutrition prevented them from producing breast milk. Stories of men riding horses in such cold that the horse's skin froze and they were able to cut meat from its back and eat it, while the horse, so numb, did not feel it, and the wound would freeze within seconds. During this period and other previous resets, the court loved its paintings, often called the Massacre of the Innocents, images of real events worldwide where children were brutally murdered for consumption. This particular painting was created by one bastard named Pieter Bruegel and is called the Massacre of the Innocents. This oil painting was later repainted, but originally depicted children torn from their mother's arms and murdered by order of the king and church. A mother crying over a dead child, pleading for mercy, people breaking down doors, abducting children, stabbing children, impaling with spears. Personally, I think such paintings should be burned, but this particular painting hangs on the wall of the dining hall at Windsor Castle, the seat of the King of the United Kingdom. Absolutely shameful. Catastrophic population declines worldwide. Food shortages affected both the human population and livestock, leading to high livestock mortality due to lack of feed and resources. Increased prices of remaining livestock caused social unrest, and that explains why people on the timeline before the reset built huge greenhouses. They protected their crops from the effects of the Little Ice Age. There are many events like wars, civil wars, massacres, and other horrors related to the Little Ice Age and the human crisis too numerous to mention all. Here are a few I personally investigated. The general crisis contributed to conditions that sparked the American Revolution in 1775, but due to indoctrination most Americans still believe it was because the English imposed a tea tax. This era was marked by various massacres, civil wars, and disputes with massive loss of lives. In 1709 alone, temperatures in Paris, France fell for an extended period to -15 degrees. Extreme frosts resulted in famine and hypothermia, and by the end of 1710 caused an estimated 600,000 deaths. Sea ice surrounded Iceland and trapped its inhabitants. Then the local reindeer louse exploded and within one day killed more than half the population. The Finnish winter of 1696–97 killed 40% of the population during a year-long famine. In Estonia, the same winter killed 50% of the population. Rivers worldwide, such as the Thames in London, froze to a depth of 1 foot, and from 1607 to 1814 frost fairs were held on them. Before I go over mortality worldwide during the Little Ice Age and the general crisis of humanity, I want to show you how artificial intelligence is hiding all this from you and how cunning it is. I will type in the search engine "fall of the Ming Dynasty," but you can ask anything related to the Little Ice Age and you will encounter the same fraud. Specifically, I asked about its fall. And as you can browse through every link and scroll for hours, you will not find a single mention of the Little Ice Age or the general crisis of humanity, because they do not want you to connect the truth about our past. But let's try asking another question. We will not use the word fall as in the fall of the Ming Dynasty, we will just type Ming Dynasty. This time, however, we include the codename Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age significantly affected the Ming Dynasty and contributed to its decline and final fall in 1644. During the same period, Tartaria was wiped out and erased from history, to which I will return later for you. Artificial intelligence does this because it knows you already know the truth and so it presents you with the other version. We have the so-called mainstream version, the usual nonsense taught in schools, courts, indoctrination camps. Then we have the version they admit to when you already know the truth. And then of course is the real truth, the deep analysis that reveals the true horrors of reality. Another quick example, ask for China's population in 1700 and you get a massive population increase. Add the Little Ice Age to the question and you learn that in the same period there was a massive population decline. The same question, the same search engine within 1 minute and you get two completely opposite answers. By 1850 China lost 95% of its population. But mainstream will tell you that during the Little Ice Age and the general crisis of humanity populations rose from 150 to 400 million. This stupid artificial intelligence will not fool me. Artificial intelligence does not match the enlightened human brain and heart. Let's go to mortality in individual countries. No search engine will give you approximate numbers or percentages, but they might tell you the Ming Dynasty then collapsed, causing the death of all their 300 million inhabitants. Since they made up the majority of then China, and when you factor in all other reports on famines, civil wars, and catastrophic regional destruction and loss of life during this period, I can take all the information I have studied on this topic and provide a fairly accurate estimate of population decline for most countries that kept good records at that time. Ming Dynasty, 100% dead, 300 million, which is the current population of the Americas. A land called California, 100% dead, about 10 million. I will get to California later, but this is not today's California. It does not differ at all from Tartaria, the land and people destroyed during the Ice Age and erased from history. A land 4 times larger than Europe, with the difference that California was completely destroyed and sunk to the depths of the Pacific. Northern clans in Greenland, 100% dead, about 10 million. Iceland, 100% dead, 200,000. Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island, 100% dead. France, 99% dead. And even though it sounds strange, I have a good reason for it, and once you start studying this reset yourself you will understand. It is almost impossible for the French to have survived. The early first wave of American settlers, 95% dead. Those now called Native Americans, 95% dead, about 100 million. And it was not because of smallpox, unless smallpox was a cover name for genocide. Tartaria, 80% dead, about 300 million. Again I repeat, I will get to the Tartars later. Finland, 95% dead. Estonia, 95% dead. Ireland, 90% dead. Germany, 80% dead. Spain, 70% dead. England, 70% dead. The Dutch allegedly had their golden age between the late 16th and 18th centuries, but nonetheless were decimated like the rest of the world with a 50% population decline by 1800. The only country where the population actually grew, and I mean really just one, guess which? And no, it's not India. Although our brothers and sisters there multiply like rabbits, it's actually Scotland. My family is from Cody on both sides. Mom is from the Rajur side and Dad from Glasgow. Northern and Scottish genetics suit my soul. We from Cody have courage. Every nation is upside down, which leads some big brains to suspect we are nearing the end of the world. It sounds a bit like today, doesn't it? These folks also thought Jesus would come to save them, as I kept saying over and over. Keep in mind that the mainstream claims almost every masterful construction around us was built around 1800, while the world population dropped to 10% and people ate their own children to survive a few weeks before they themselves died of hunger. Pretty good, huh? But when you dig deeper, you don't see mass construction of masterpieces worldwide. We find empty dead cities worldwide, one hell after another as they burn the remains of the perished and massacred populations. It is easier to burn these places to the ground than to clear them by hand. Massive fires in nearly every city worldwide at the same time. Whole massive built-up cities ablaze with stories that someone dropped a candle or burned bread, causing the whole city to burn down. Mostly no or only minimal casualties were reported. There was no one to burn, they were long dead. Fire cleared and prepared the ground for the period of our timeline, but clearly it was more than just fire. These areas look more like war zones protecting certain zones and structures that were chosen for preservation. I would say it more resembled what was dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki in 1945. Before I move on to another topic, this previous reset I just showed you was not the only one I found. I found them all. Now I won't get into the others because they are irrelevant for the overall picture and what I really want to show you. Moreover, in my opinion, our future at this moment is more important than the past of our possible ancestors. You can identify all previous resets by tracking scientific climate data, isotopic ratios, and similar things. They always correspond with catastrophic events and reported massacres and mass death events in historical records. The truth is always hidden right in front of your eyes. You just have to piece it together. When the world emerged from the Ice Age in the mid to late 19th century, the survivors encountered the remains of the Old World and the New World they inherited. The disaster reshaped and decimated the landscape around them and buried it deep in hardened mud, debris, and the remains of masses who perished. These survivors were fully aware of the events that happened. Stories were passed along and even made it into early films of that era, such as the 1944 film Meet Me in St. Louis, set during the World's Fair of 1904. Cotton candy, you'll spoil your dinner. Dad, we saw that Galipatina flood. Big waves came and flooded the whole town, and when the water receded it was all muddy and terrible, full of dead bodies. Even though the powerful tried hard to erase these undeniable events from our recent past entirely, the evidence speaks for itself. I deliberately selected photographs from all over the world, from China, Russia, the United Kingdom. From all over Europe, India, Africa, Egypt, America, Australia, and many other places in this realm. It was global and caused by direct consequences of the Little Ice Age, and digging up all that soil must have been backbreaking work for the generation back then. I like this photo, it's worth 1,000 words. These two guys here. That guy on the left, he's got charisma. That person loves his work, he's a professional digger, a happy man at his job. With this guy you just know he really hates his work. All hunched over, probably wanted to be a ballerina or something. He's not a happy man, but luckily trains were invented. It was just necessary to find and dig up all the buried rails because places like America already had a complete railroad network before the reset. Clean all bridges? Pardon me, I mean build all the bridges, bore tunnels through the entire mountains, and find a few working trains. Now that trains were reinvented, they could start loading all that soil much faster. And over the years, people from our early timeline began reverse engineering technologies from before the reset, like steam engines and airships. Most people confuse this type of technology with ancient technology or old world technology. This technology was created by people from our timeline before the reset between 1250 and 1650. It had nothing to do with people who built such buildings, and I will prove that later indisputably. The connection between the Little Ice Age, weather events, and muddy floods. The Little Ice Age was marked by long periods of heavy rains that saturated the soil. This saturation increased the likelihood of mud floods, especially in areas with steep terrain or loose soil, which could flood nearby structures. Historical records from the Little Ice Age document cases of floods and mudslides that impacted whole communities. These records often describe the destruction of homes and public buildings, indicating many structures were destroyed or seriously damaged. During this period, these are old world houses, as you can see, flooded with mud. As always, when the surroundings of these buildings were excavated, the original ground floor level was revealed. And as you see, it was not a basement. This original ground floor had windows and doors, glazed windows leading into the mud. It does not make sense, does it? And like every old world building, this stone-looking building is just a red brick structure coated with geopolymer plaster to look like stone. This ancient building, today called the Mormon Temple in Utah, North America, was allegedly dedicated in 1893. This is meant to convince us that its construction was completed in 1893. But as you see, just like all ancient buildings and old world buildings worldwide, this building is heavily flooded with mud and always has been since the beginning of our timeline. This building was excavated twice during our timeline. The first time in the 1970s, the interrupted line shows the ground level of our timeline and the original arched entrance to the original ground floor, and shows the full height of windows flooded with mud. This building was buried under about 15 feet of mud. Most mud floods occurred in the period between 1600 and 1750. This building is said to have been constructed only in 1893, which means one of two possibilities. This building was flooded with mud 200 to 300 years before it was built, or it stood there before the flood. In reality, this building is not 132 years old, it's an ancient structure at least 2,000 years old. During this next period, we see only empty cities built up, unspoiled but clearly old buildings and infrastructure. Worldwide, including countries like America, Canada, and Australia. At the time when, according to the official version, all these mud-flooded buildings were being constructed, we find only photos of primitive wooden scaffolding around palaces that should not exist, which just happened to have painters painting. I even managed to find out what the painter had written on his cap, and then suddenly boom, fully inhabited cities. Where did all these people come from after the direct consequences of the Little Ice Age and the subsequent crisis of humanity and the decimation of the world population? The official version will claim that it was only due to immigration and migration of Britons and Europeans. And I'm not saying immigration didn't happen back then, but because of the fate of the first settlers and the harsh climate during the recent Ice Age, people from the West were very reluctant to move to these new worlds, regardless of how many offers and incentives to relocate they received, such as all those posters and flyers circulated at the time, offering millions of houses built from the old world for free and millions of cheap square miles of land that wouldn't have to be paid for upfront, free transport across the Atlantic and starting grants so they could live their American dream. But if we dig a little deeper, we get a different story about resettlement. Although it's obvious to everyone, this second version acknowledges a much darker recent past. Over 540,000 children were distributed across America in a community more commonly known as orphan trains. Did these poor children become orphans because of the horrors of the previous reset, or is there an even darker explanation? The next part is more of a question from my side. Children from incubators. Were they actually incubators as we know and use them today? Or was it the period between 1860 and 1920 when genetically modified organisms were being created? And is this the place where all those soulless figures surrounding us come from? This disgusting Jew's name was Martin Arthur Carney, an obstetric apprentice who worked under another disgusting Jew, an obstetrician named Pierre Constant Burden. After the main resettlement of the world, Carney, known as the Incubator Doctor, toured world exhibitions with his bizarre show, a circus attraction featuring children in incubators where he displayed real living human bobbies. This gained worldwide attention and media coverage. But where did this parasite get a constant supply of live children? My mom loves me with every piece of her soul, and when I was born I weighed 4.5 kilos and looked like a potato. She couldn't even have tea without me drinking it. So which mother would entrust her newborn or prematurely born child to such a bastard at a time when the population of every country was drastically reduced and cities desperately needed people? Did those mothers sell their unwanted children, or were those children motherless and born unnaturally? Another topic related to this are so-called institutions. Hundreds, if not thousands, of these old world buildings served as so-called institutions between the 17th and 18th centuries. The official version claims they were insane asylums, but do you seriously think that the tough survivors of that time, after all they had been through during the last reset, would care for the mentally ill? That they would build thousands of stone palaces to help allegedly mentally ill people? Keep in mind, these weren't the softies that surround us today. These survivors had a tough core. The official version tells us that in these asylums it was more about imprisoning patients than treating them, that these prisoners were abused, tortured, and raped. So why build or rather allocate these huge amazing palaces just to serve as prisons for keeping inmates? It doesn't make sense, right? These clearly weren't asylums, nor were they built in their artificially falsified historical timeline. All these buildings are flooded with mud. Every single alleged institution I examined. These institutions were either temporary accommodations for people immigrating to places like America, perhaps lodging for incoming children, or even breeding grounds. Among the most bizarre and disturbing topics of this resettlement is the huge amount of symbolic posters and postcards suggesting the breeding and sale of children between 1890 and 1920. This is not any cute period art. France has hundreds of such examples, but as you can see they were widespread around the world, including America. You will see the word Avender there, which means for sale, as written on the back of this one sent to the USA in 1907. Dear Elle, don't you think they are too pretty on the other side? If yes, hurry and order one before they sell out. With love, Edgy. On this one the names of the children are even written right next to the individual toddlers. And if you look at the back, it's the same handwriting. Doesn't sound like a joke, does it? Children were sold worldwide. And maybe you're wondering why they advertised them this way. Would you pick your GMO child rather by this picture or something more realistic, part of our recent history that the mainstream doesn't want you to know about? Because it's quite possible that you are a descendant of one of these GMO unplayable figures. At the beginning of the 20th century, my dad was a child in an incubator on Coney Island. He was on display. That incubator was invented just then. Really, you could tell me literally anything and I would believe you. No, it's true. Ask yourself, what were the names of your grandparents? Or the names of their parents? Probably nothing, right? These catacombs today are under every ancient cathedral and church worldwide. More famous ones are in Paris, but the extent of the French catacombs only confirms the mass dying there. All bones are from the Little Ice Age period. Coincidence, right? After the last reset, these remains were arranged in tunnels of the Old World, originally built to supply water to the city, presented in a symbolic, demonic, and disrespectful manner. For most well-known catacombs, only small parts are accessible to the public, but they admit hundreds of miles are closed. People actually pay to see the bones of those massacred. Rows of dead children, and they find it fascinating. Something I can only explain as trophies from that extermination. And it's no coincidence that they are under every old world power plant, nor why these so-called churches are surrounded by graves with rotting bodies of the dead. Graves dating after the last reset. That's all I can say on this shameful topic. Because the AI of that cult knows who I am and knows that I know the truth, it will communicate with me differently than with most others. When I ask why that cult did this to people, why they reset them, why they lie to them, this is my answer. When empires, nations, or rulers win a war or overthrow a system, they also rewrite the narrative to justify their power. If people knew all the ways they were exploited, they would resist. Suppressing certain truths keeps control over the population. Educational systems are designed for obedience, not discovery. Children are taught embellished versions of events instead of the harsh reality. Truth threatens power. A population that knows its real history is harder to control. A society that remembers lost knowledge doesn't need rulers. People who understand how often we've been reset would question everything. Entire empires, lost technologies, and cultural worldviews simply don't fit into textbooks. A cult literally means hidden. The ruling classes often kept deeper knowledge to themselves. Religion and politics both censored anything that threatened their authority and labeled it heresy, superstition, or conspiracy. Governments and media shape collective memory through propaganda, film, school curricula, and even monuments. By controlling what we remember, they influence how we behave. I think that answers my questions quite well. Humanity lived, could live, and would live in harmony and abundance without being controlled. We wouldn't need to break laws, customary law, natural law, law of the land, such as causing no harm or loss to another human being. That's all we need. That covers all crimes. But that won't stop that cult from enforcing their 70,000 legal standards put in place to control us and extort money from us, to feed their own greed, destruction, genocides, and even finance our current Great Reset. Legal rule has the force of law only with the consent of the governed. They poison our sky and air while blocking the sun and even shamelessly admit it, pushing us into another little ice age, and I've already shown you what happens next. They poison our water supplies, poison our food, poison our healthcare. Their artificial intelligence organizes worldwide fake pandemics, and those docile, obedient, unplayable characters did what they were programmed to do. They tried to control us, speaking muffled through face masks while losing their little minds and standing in line like cattle to the slaughterhouse. Not that they hadn't tried this fraudulent pandemic before. There's absolutely nothing new under the sun. Just tests for gathering data on the next necessary step and adapting all their infrastructure. All areas and topics of the truth movement have been infiltrated by planted fraudsters and what I call unplayable truth seekers. Unplayable characters playing conspiracy theorists pushing 5% truth from 95% fantasy crap, disinformation, fear, and deception. And then we have creators of truthful content fully controlled by AI, spitting out the same crap as those unplayable truth seekers. Real investigative journalists searching for truth face the same problem. They are hindered by their own beliefs. Just as planned, so they never reveal 100% truth on a specific topic they report on. Year after year, they stagnate on one piece of the puzzle and don't try to reveal the whole picture, or they spit out nonsense about their imaginary ice wall that imprisons their herd in their own minds, which is something I will soon irrefutably prove does not exist. Where do you think the ice wall and flat earth model came from? One of the biggest deceptions this cult brainwashes even so-called truth seekers with is their religions. Following a strong spiritual path of enlightenment and truly understanding who you are only expands your mind, body, abilities, and raises our frequency. We don't need their religions that close your mind and imprison you in fear. Established to control you, divide you, and force you to hate, kill, and fight each other on low levels. As for this Satan's short period which most so-called truth-seekers babble about, the cult forced the masses to believe in and worship a false god who was created through rape. And I'm quite sure that one of the 10 commandments and sin is fucking another man's wife. The backbone of the Christian cult is the 10 commandments, something all Christians seem to circumvent. For example, you shall have no other god but me, your God, and you shall have no other savior but me, your God. But Jesus is your God and your savior created through rape, right? And his dad, that psychopathic god who massacred this world by flooding it and killing every man, woman, and innocent child. The cult deceived all religions into worshipping evil to make you all sinners. Maybe that's why the cult often performs resets and massacres the population to collect the souls of its herd. The timeline before the last reset also believed Jesus would come to save them. He never showed up. If people are so naive and unenlightened that they don't see this clear deception, then maybe it's best if they sell their souls to Jesus for so-called salvation. I don't believe anything I can't prove. That's why these are your beliefs, because you can't. If something is true, you can prove it. We were created in this world, but not cults with false gods created by their artificial intelligence. I want to make it clear right from the start that I don't intend to sail to countries recently designated as Antarctica. But understanding the truth about Antarctica is crucial to understanding the bigger picture. And this is not a flat Earth model. Our supposed known world in the middle, the icy ring called the Antarctic ice wall that surrounds our world and imprisons your mind. The first globular maps showing ice or an ice wall appeared around 1892, for example, the famous and heavily promoted Gleason map. Today we know that all that created ice we see melting so fast today was caused by the Little Ice Age between 1600 and 1850. And I will prove it later. Today Antarctica is the only remaining landmass that still remains partially frozen. The story about Antarctica, of course, has its deceptions, but in reality it is quite close to its narrative compared to the deliberately lying flat Earth model. Soon after the end of the Little Ice Age, expeditions of Freemason Admiral Bayard were sent to check the damage and see what was left. A few years later, in 1961, the Antarctic Treaty was signed. The only agreement signed by all powers that was never broken. Most who claimed this treaty prevents the public from traveling south of 60 degrees latitude were criticized. Now don't get me wrong, restricting our movement beyond the 60th parallel is exactly what that treaty does. But in the second point of their rules it states there will be complete freedom of scientific research. So feel free to ask your rulers for permission and request to explore Antarctica to scientifically prove their own crap is a lie. And if you are granted permission, I will fully finance the expedition and take you there myself. But you will be ignored, investigated, or rejected. And don't think you can lie your way to permission. As stated in point 7, all Antarctic stations and all ships and aircraft supplying Antarctica must be open to inspectors from any treaty country. But they also add point 6. The treaty applies to all land and ice shelves south of 60 degrees south latitude but not to the sea, which quickly brings us to their fake trips and vacations in Antarctica. We have South America, down south we have Cape Horn and Drake Passage. An ocean area 600 miles wide, this narrow passage along with Cape Horn where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet. Known among our sailors as the most treacherous area in the world, the worst place anyone would want to sail through. A true test of seamanship and courage, a place that has claimed tens of thousands of lives. So when it comes to trips to Antarctica, this is the worst place to sail ships. Keep that in mind. The official version and misleading guides claim there are 8 ways to explore Antarctica, and a few of them you can buy tickets for £10,000 to £30,000 per person, sometimes for just a 2-day trip. Number 1, classic cruise to the Western Peninsula, pre-cruise through Drake Passage by ship. Even jokes about unpredictable seas of death. Stops at the Shetland Islands, King George Island and Half Moon Island, which is not Antarctica. But the flooded caldera of Deception Island, you just can't make that up, and we will return to it later. Number 2. Crossing the Southern Polar Circle. This sounds more promising, right? Only a handful of souls have gotten further than the 66 degrees south latitude. Maybe they'll let you be the 6th, right? Again, crossing Drake Passage by ship. Most Antarctic cruises don't actually cross the polar circle. Shocking, isn't it? A few days on a ship around the Western Peninsula, of course with a view from the deck. Potentially crossing the polar circle means you didn't cross it and won't cross it. Number 3, Antarctica, South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, again crossing Drake Passage. Neither the Falklands nor South Georgia are Antarctica. Number 4, Ross Sea from New Zealand. Only a few ships head south from New Zealand annually. So good luck booking this fake trip to Antarctica. But even if you succeed, the Snares Islands, Macquarie, Campbell Islands and Auckland Islands are not Antarctica. Number 5, Weddell Sea and Eastern Peninsula. Again across Drake Passage, Paulet Island at the tip of the peninsula is not Antarctica. Number 6, Flight to Antarctica and beyond to the pole. A 5-hour flight to what they call the geographic South Pole. What a joke, but you spend 3 to 4 hours there. They actually take you to the peninsula and show you a cheap barber's pole to take selfies with. Don't even bring a compass because it won't show you're near the South Pole because you are. Number 7, Partial Circumnavigation. Ship from New Zealand through Drake Passage. Peter I. Island sailing around the Amundsen Sea. Ross Sea or Ross Island is not Antarctica. Also, all those photos of steep ice walls come from the Ross Shelf Glacier, but in reality it's just this little piece. Number 8, Laughable Flight over the Drake. Just a plain trip, no landing, nothing more to add. Now it's time to show you what your world looked like before. Some of you may have already seen this. This is Urban Monty's map from 1587, one of the largest old world maps measuring 10 x 10 feet, truly excellent and accurate map. But I have no intention of using this 400-year-old map to navigate to countries that were hidden from us. Remember how I earlier discovered the last Great Reset, the Little Ice Age, and the crisis of humanity thanks to this map? It's no coincidence that it is the least documented old world map among so-called truth seekers. They don't want you to look at this map because you might discover hundreds of truths and hidden knowledge like I did. But even that cult must follow the rules of this world. The truth must be found hidden in plain sight, but they love to turn your world upside down in every way, literally. Due to pesky cartographers and historians who preserved their soul and mind to think and proved that today's Mercator map is completely distorted and inaccurate compared to the slightly more accurate but still deceptive Gulpeters projection, the cult was forced to implement crisis communication, and as always slowly adapt a new misleading narrative. But the effort to wrap our world around a globe distorts both of these deceptive maps. Many good presentations and papers have been written on this topic. The main overlooked part regarding the Gulpeters projection is that it should be oriented like this. A fact I will explain later. All true maps, new and old, are navigational aids for land, sea, and air. All the maps I show are mainly maritime navigation maps. All real maps contain a key to safe navigation on the map itself. If the map doesn't have it, it's just a pretty picture or fantasy art like this pile of crap all those NPC truth seekers push. In modern maritime navigation, we use several types of technology to travel precisely and as safely as possible. Very few modern civilian sailors can read paper maps and determine course. Like most things nowadays, technology is depriving them of human skills their ancestors relied on and makes them lazy, incompetent, and easily disposable sheep. Even though I have map plotters and other equipment like radar on board, I understand technology is often unreliable, but the captain is old school. A simple compass or a clear view of the sun or stars is all I need to navigate in this world around us. Thanks to new and old maps, reliable equipment like autopilot and radar, and knowledge of all maritime songs, I'm in my element. I translated the entire Monty map from 1587 from Old Italian to Italian and then to English. Do I believe Monty captured the outer lands and their coasts in the smallest detail? No. Not only were these lands decimated during the Little Ice Age, but you will see that in Monty's time they were basically unknown people before our reset. In this time frame, it was the edge of the known world. The most important task of any nautical map is to inform how to travel from one country to another. Routes, ports, tides, dangers along the way, just such things. North points to the center of our world from all directions. South points outwards in all directions simultaneously with north. To the right when looking north is east, and to the left when looking north is west. For example, to travel to Galicia, one of the outer lands, I would go to the center of Galicia depicted by Monty and head straight north. This takes me to places now called southern Mexico, to these ports. On this page I see what the lands were already named in 1550, based on the date you enter down here. As you can see, today's Mexico. Change the date to Monty's time, the year 1587, and you see 3 kingdoms. One of them is New Galicia with a slight spelling difference because Monty's map is in Old Italian and the other in English. From the mainland New Galicia you would head south to Galicia, the continent, from any of the many ports Monty marked along New Galicia. By 1787 America was already taken, but New Galicia still existed and Rupert also took his piece. Between 1882 and 83, New Galicia was renamed to Jalisco and its history was hidden and rewritten, but many ancient buildings still remain in this area. This way I can go through the entire map and it fits perfectly with the new one. I want to guide you through inner and outer lands because this map is the key to understanding the broader context and answers hundreds of questions. We'll start in the middle. Besides the new map they will use for navigation, all maps as usual are presented upside down. So let's turn this G the right way. North Pole, Arctic, Hyperborea, Rupes Nigra, Sumeru, Garden of Eden. Over the years it has had many names. My Lycian ancestors called it Asgard. This G in the middle at 90 degrees in cartography, this G basically means the goal. And even though we can't see what's under the goal mark in Old World cartography, it's always the same. Magnetic Mountain, Mount Meru, Black Rock, Mount Sinai, Holy Mountain. Again, this mountain has many names, and the reason it looks so familiar is that these images have been forced upon you your whole life. Hidden right in front of your eyes, the source of energy for us in this world, 4 islands separated by 4 rivers, one always drawn with 7 branches. The original Euphrates River, the mountain described as a heart pulling oceans inward and pushing them back out, causing tides and world ocean currents, maintaining the balance of warm water in our oceans, like every plasma source. On each side of Hyperborea we have the island of Anode and the island of Cathode. Cathode, the positive life giver. Magnetic Pole and lush green island. Anode, the negative life taker, pole of the magnet Husiartsa. I actually can't translate what Husiartsa means, maybe someone of you knows, but if we break down the word arxa, magnetic, maybe there is a connection, I'm not sure. The islands of Anode and Cathode were depicted in many other ancient cartographies, showing an understanding of this world up until our recent timeline. Ancient civilizations and Old World civilizations all knew this and incorporated it into everything. Now down to the North Sea, towards the Atlantic, we have Greenland and Iceland, Friesland and Hiltland, 2 other countries, submerged during the Little Ice Age around 1783 and removed from artificial intelligence history. We have here the United Kingdom Scotty, Scotsco, Aberdeen, and we have Elgin, Glasgow. Moving to Ireland you clearly see Dublin, Ingal, England, Lincoln, Lincoln, London. Further into France we have Paris, a place where I will soon sail with my son St. Michael's Mount. An amazing ancient island city off the coast of Normandy. The Abbey of Le Merveille, which stands on top of a hill about 300 feet above the sea. I love such gems that survived the events of the Little Ice Age. Next to the Mediterranean Sea. Do we have Spain? Italy, the tower in Pisa, probably before the soil shifts during the Little Ice Age gave it its tilt. Cairo is one of the largest cities depicted on Monty's map. Moving across the Atlantic. Remember, it is the year 1587, so Canada at that time had only Canadian provinces but fully built with the ancient infrastructure of the Old World that we see there today. Notice that griffin? That will make sense later. The translation was a bit off here, but it basically says something like, here are griffins with 4 legs like eagles, and I am quite sure it says something about large crabs, but other translations in Canada turned out perfectly. When these villagers were discovered, they found very tall, almost giant men and women who accompanied the convoys. In chains, beardless and naked, exterminated and enslaved like all the natives. Down on the east coast of today's North America we have Florida. Florida was discovered in 1522 around Easter on the day it was discovered. It is written there twice discovered only 65 years before the creation of this map. This shows how little this timeline knew before it was reset itself. And it was not the so-called American Indians who built these cities and lived here, as I will soon prove, down to Mexico. At that time Mexico was just a city, not a country, and Monty depicts this city perfectly. Before its complete destruction during the Little Ice Age, Mexico was the largest city and the capital of the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs were not the primitive savages as the mainstream claims. Toward the end, they became wilder and began sacrificing people to the weather gods, but only as a direct consequence of the Little Ice Age. But at the same time, the Satanic Church burned hundreds of thousands of women because they thought they were witches causing bad weather with magic. Sometimes an entire family, including children, was burned at the stake. So were these Aztecs any more stupidly despised than the rest of the so-called civilized Christian world of that time? However, as soon as the sea ice melted, the Aztecs faced Christian genocide and were immediately colonized. We moved to the west coast of America. Anyone who knows geography knows it looks strange. This well-known and documented land called California was one of the largest territories lost during the catastrophic destruction of this area in the Little Ice Age. And as you see, we have today's California where it is today. And a bit north we have San Francisco, as expected, with active faults that will erupt 20 years later. This entire area, 4 times larger than Europe, first flooded into its own continent and then around 1630 separated into the ocean. From there, Americans have their myths that one day California will break off and sink into the Pacific Ocean. It's not about the modern California falling into the ocean, but that the land of California truly fell into the ocean. It is like a whisper from your ancestors. And keep in mind that the official version claims San Francisco was founded in 1776 and named in 1847. But here in 1587 it is named San Francisco, 300 years before that false official version allegedly named it at all. Exactly as I showed you, to get to the land of California, you would have to travel south from mainland California. This line points south, directly south from mainland California to the California port in the land of California. Just like from mainland New Galicia to the outer continent of Galicia. The land of California and its inhabitants disappeared around 1630 to 1700 when California collapsed into the Pacific. Other countries and peoples erased from history, just like Tartary, Friesland, and Helland. Quickly moving on to South America. Returning to what I showed you earlier, that massive loss of land in this area, as you see on my rough sketch of what remains today. As I said, once you know the truth and use the right code words, the official version admits this loss of land throughout this empire. During the Little Ice Age, which lasted approximately from the 16th to the 19th century, South America experienced significant environmental changes that especially affected its coastal areas. These changes influenced both flooding and coastline retreat. These floods were often caused by both heavy rains and rapid glacier melting. Especially the Patagonian coast and parts of northern Chile faced erosion. Estimates suggest that during the Little Ice Age approximately 216,000 square miles were lost in South America. Directly these areas. This area is now Patagonia, formerly called Regione di Giganti, the land of giants. This may sound a bit silly to some, but it was a reality documented in many ship logs of many famous and respected naval admirals and captains in this timeline T before the reset. These logs reported 8 to 12-foot tall men and women, including the expedition of naval officer Fernand Magalhães, an explorer who in 1520 discovered the Magellan Strait, a series of passages between Patagonia and today's Antarctica. He also named the Pacific Ocean. He and other crew members recorded diaries about these giants during the expedition. It cost him his life when he was killed by natives in the Philippines, but do not pity that parasite. He got what he deserved. I will not go into details, but he befriended those peace-loving giants, gained their trust, then captured some, enslaved them, mistreated them, and they died on the ship. All these areas broke off around 1630 and sank into the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans at the same time the continent of California disappeared. Near China, the Great Chinese Wall, an amazing old wall made of red bricks. A few parts have been reconstructed for tourists, but most were destroyed during the recent Ice Age. But there is no great mystery in it. It has nothing to do with defense, it is just an old trade route across mountains and rivers between the Chinese Ming Dynasty and Tartary. Even more amazing than Mexico City, this is a giant island city named Quinsha, the largest star-shaped fortress I have ever seen, with 5 other star-shaped fortresses around it. You may think this is fantasy, right? No way. Known as the Heavenly City, the most beautiful city in the world. Did you notice those 3 bridges? I told you Monty is a master. This map for the year 1587 was amazingly accurate. As you see, a huge star-shaped fortress. Unfortunately, this city and everything around it, including its inhabitants, was wiped out as a direct consequence of the Little Ice Age. People seriously need to stop calling everything Old Tartarian. Once you know the truth, you will see how ridiculous it is. That cult spreads its misinformation and confusion. The cult tries hard to make most of you think that the Tartars built the entire old world. They made you believe that the least likely race and country capable of doing this were actually the ones who did it. Tartary was wiped out around the same time as the 5th Ming Dynasty, around 1644. We can only assume Tartary fell the same way. This area is Tartary, today called Russia. In the lower area, small towns and images are scattered. The upper northern areas were composed of individual teepee villages of Tatar tribes, nomads migrating according to the seasons, hence the tents and wagons. As we read in these inscriptions, all these wild Tatars without permanent dwellings carry their pavilions with them and carry leather covers they use instead of homes. Now notice these white animals pulling their wagons. These animals, they are not wild animals, they are depicted with blue collars, they are work animals. And considering that animals such as horses appeared en masse in Asia and America only around 1750, with British and European settlers, this description refers to Canis Allens, meaning Great Danes. A dog breed called Great Dane still exists today. Due to crossbreeding, today's Danes are smaller than the original Tatar breed, but still look at the size of those beasts. Now you see how these Great Danes pulled their wagons. Here we have Meridar Taro, the Tatarian Ocean. Arsarat, these are the 10 tribes of Israel. Manticore, here are animals with human faces, lion bodies and snake tails. I guess this is a female manticore or this guy just has female breasts. When Monte Urbano draws or talks about these creatures, it's because they are real. When he shows a unicorn, he means a unicorn. When he shows a cyclops, he means a cyclops. When he shows birds flying with elephants, it's because they saw a bird flying with an elephant and that bird was named No. We are moving from what we know as Tartary to what is today called Alaska. Remember, when the land of California collapsed into the Pacific Ocean, it took half of today's Alaska with it. This area in 1587 was called the province of Ananian and the province of Quivira. Note another griffin, like in Canada and Tartary, of course a real creature and symbol of Tartary and China, including the Ming dynasty. Here it is written about a tribe living inland in Inuyal in Tartary on the territory of today's Alaska. This land is the area of Tartary. Just like today's countries claim rights over territories not connected to them. Also notice the same Tatar teepee villages, tribes, and the same German dogs. Small built towns in the lower southern regions, just like in Tartary, and numerous ports in the western areas of today's Alaska, transitioning to the heavenly city of the Ming dynasty. After the fall of the Ming dynasty in Tartary, surviving Tatars had to migrate south to Canada and what became North America. For unknown reasons, the court erased Tartary and the Tatars from history textbooks and renamed them Native American Indians. Tatars are not indigenous to these territories. Tatars are not Americans. They were on this land before America was seized and named, and Tatars are not Indians. These are Indians, from India. Tatars are of Oriental origin, but they are their own unique human species. While preserving their ancient traditions of natural life in teepees, wise and knowledgeable. A new beginning in the New World, still without horses on the land, and with scientific evidence that the first dogs in America came from Asia and Tartary due to lack of resources and great famines worldwide at the time, the old ways of Great Danes had to adapt. Surviving Tatars thrived on this fully developed land as you see all over Canada and America, yet they still chose to live as they always lived, naturally and beautifully. Returning to the inscriptions in Tartary Arsarat, these are the 10 tribes of Israel. This is not today's state of Israel, but look who they recognize as one of the tribes of Israel, American Indians. We now know they are Tatars. That is why this inscription was written in Tartary. However, this list of tribe names does not mention the Tatars, only under their new created name, Native American Indians. Unfortunately for the Tatars, the sea ice melted and allowed settlers to invade, and Christianity caught up with them. During the following 100 years, up to 100 million remaining adult Tatars were wiped out. And artificial intelligence wrote a new history for today's Native American Indians. I think the correct term is cultural genocide. Indoctrination through forced Christian school attendance. Tartary, like many other countries such as California, Frisco and Hildland, was destroyed by the Little Ice Age, the last major reset, and erased from history. The way Tartary was rediscovered in our timeline was through Old World maps. Most people now focus on when Tartary was removed from the maps and what must have happened to them, which I have just explained. However, no one seems to ask when Tartary first appeared on maps, and the answer is 1292. Around this date the land of Tartary was formed and the same land was destroyed around 1644. Great Tartary, which built everything and everywhere, every building in every country, existed from beginning to end for 352 years and lived in teepees the whole time. They still do. The name Tartary did not exist before the late 13th century. Before anyone starts babbling, it was the people who lived there before who built everything and everywhere. Exactly. They were not called Tartarians, so why does Most call everything from the old world Tartarian? The land that inhabited this territory before it started being called Tartary in 1292 was called Kievan Rus, and before that country was called Scythia. If you still believe Tartary built everything and everywhere, then my friend, you have completely lost your mind. I will quickly guide you through the outer territories. South of South America we have Tierra del Fuego, the only land without its own actual name, i.e. Antarctica. And as it is written there, a harbor for every wind, a seaport in today's Antarctica in 1587, and the civilization that inhabited this continent was called the Hyperboreans. Keep in mind that the official version claims that this continent, the remaining part of which is called Antarctica today, was discovered and explored only in 1911. But here it is more than 300 years earlier with details about its civilization, ports, rivers, and terrain. There is a good reason why these two lands were called Tierra del Fuego. This land bleeds red rivers. From Admiral Bayard's expedition landing on 300 square miles of warm areas in Antarctica, those were warm lakes as I showed you earlier near Deception Island. This massive island they use as a port, very close to where Monty's port was, hot springs and everywhere red rocks. These are some of the reasons why this land was called Tierra del Fuego. South of southern Mexico to Galicia, south of California to Lacache. I will get to this later, but here lives that cult and some of their puppets. South of South China to New Guinea, and this will blow your mind later, and Monty described its inhabitants who are among us. South of South India to Patalia, and again according to Monty's details it is inhabited. South of West Africa to what I call Vista 3, south of South Africa to what I call Vista 2 and 1, south of South Africa to what I call Vista 2 and 1. And in Monty's timeline this land was discovered by the Portuguese. We will all return to these later on a modern map. As I briefly explained at the beginning, the moon is not a solid object where Freemasons could land. It is a concentrated electromagnetic plasma phenomenon. Electromagnetic energy emanates from within the Earth at the magnetic north. The moon is an inverted image of the floor plan of our, and I will talk about this as a political map. It will help you orient yourself a little better. This lunar map is so exactly detailed that it is impossible for it to be a coincidence. I don't believe anything and tried to disprove it, but it's impossible. It matches perfectly with Monty, and I know Monty's map is accurate. And some of you are now saying, Captain, now you're contradicting yourself. You said that a map is a real map only if it has a built-in key, a navigation guide for navigating the map itself. And you are right, don't take your eyes off the screen. Perfection. Here is the key. Monty's map is amazingly accurate for its time. The lunar map is amazingly accurate today. Before I dive into it, I want to thank Vibes of Cosmos for his years of research on this topic. His work is excellent, and with respect to Vibes and every other honest truth journalist, unfortunately, like most researchers, they make mistakes and sometimes fail to understand the broader context and are blinded by the faith imposed on them. So, as with all these topics I touched on during this presentation, I corrected, connected, and completed the work of Vibes of Cosmos on this specific topic. Vibes has the locations of outer lands in geographically incorrect areas, in the wrong order, and his seemingly unfinished work is even missing some. These mistakes had 3 reasons. First, Vibes doesn't understand the devastation caused by the recent Little Ice Age. Between Monty's 1587 map and modern maps and the huge amount of lost land. Second, Vibes is not an expert in cartography, specializing in Old World cartography and especially Urbano Monty 1587. Third, Vibes is neither a sailor nor truly understands maritime navigation, charting into maps, or astronavigation. Vibes mistakenly labeled this mainland as New Guinea, but it is actually Kesh. What I marked here was the original location of New Guinea before the devastation during the Little Ice Age, and everything inside this line was part of New Guinea, and here are the others. As you see, this includes Australia and New Zealand along with other surrounding islands like Fiji. I can prove this geographically indisputably among dozens of other pieces of evidence, mainly with the help of Monty's key map, and the implications are absolutely staggering. Australia is full of old world architecture and even ancient architecture that predates the recent reset and the Little Ice Age. That means there was architecture and infrastructure not only in our known world but also in the outer lands around us. The mainstream tells us that Australia was discovered by James Cook in 1770 and named around 1825, and that every old world building there was built only afterward. And as you see on Monty's map, the massive Australian mainland is missing in the very detailed area where it should be geographically located. On the entire Monty map, only one country is missing. Guess which one? Yes, Australia, but actually Monty didn't omit Australia, you have it right in front of you. That is how Australia looked before. All the seabeds in the area erupted all at once over many years, causing massive earthquakes with soil slips and parts of entire countries sinking into the ocean. During the Little Ice Age, which ended only in 1860. Now I will present one of the indisputable pieces of evidence, and then move on to some more interesting ones among the dozens I have gathered. There are a few ways to use today's geographical location of Australia to find the same area on Monty's map. The tropical zodiac is a system that divides the sky into 12 equal parts, each corresponding to a zodiac sign. The tropical zodiac is not used directly for navigation, but understanding celestial movements is key for us navigators. The Tropic of Capricorn passes through South Africa, South America, and Australia. This parallel marks the southernmost point where the sun can be directly overhead at noon during the December solstice. The Tropic of Capricorn passes through the southern parts of South Africa, exactly as on Monty's map, and passes through the central parts of South America as in Monty's, and finally goes through the central area of Australia. When tracking the Tropic of Capricorn to the area where Australia lies geographically today, only this part of the country passes through Capricorn, showing Australia's location on Monty's map. And guess on which mainland we are? Yes, Nova Guinea. It fits perfectly, and geographically Australia lies right here. New Guinea is just below the equator line. And the Indonesian islands are also geographically in a single line with the location of Australia. Using Borneo as a reference, because its name has not changed since this 1587 map and today's Borneo, we have Malaysia, Singapore, Java, which since 1587 suffered a serious hit. Sulawesi, New Zealand and surrounding islands were also part of New Guinea. Before the Little Ice Age and the devastation that came with it, Papua New Guinea was known as the Kingdom of Jailolo. We still see remnants of old city names like Papias, Papua New Guinea. The official version says the Spanish named it first after the reset as Nueva Guinea, Nueva Guinea, Nova Guinea. Apparently named for the lands and mainland of the Outer Ring, which was just renamed Australia. The documented civilization in New Guinea was called the Kingdom of Brasilia, Australia, Brasilia. It sounds similar, but it's getting weirder. The oceans on Monty's map behind the Ring of Continents had their names. Behind New Guinea, now Australia, Oceano Avstralgesiado. Altogether, it simply translates as the South Ocean. But if we take that word as it was then written and pronounced Avstral, the letter Fe in Old Italian was pronounced like U in modern Italian. So it is Austral, Australia. Is it a coincidence that the newly named Australia can be formed from the name of its previous kingdom, Brasilia, and its ocean, Austral? Furthermore, if you add Nueva Guinea, Nova Guinea, New Guinea, that is the name of the old land, its kingdom and ocean, hidden in the new names. Clearly, it is not a coincidence because I have already proved it is geographically Australia. Discovered in 1770 only in a dream that, I could continue with connecting names but want to show you the people from the Kingdom of Brasilia. Monty's map has several descriptions of New Guinea's inhabitants. The photos shown are today's Australian natives, New Zealand Maoris and New Guinean peoples. These peoples are of the same race, just different tribes divided by the devastation of the Little Ice Age. In these countries which are still not well known, men walk naked, and among them, the oldest serve as kings who govern in a republican manner, all seen barbarically without any rules in this regard. The inhabitants of this land do not want to trade with foreigners nor their friendship, and their kings forbid it. Under the strictest punishments and a gift for the idolaters, that means come ashore and we will kill and eat you. During any of those expeditions, if I had anchored on the coast and this gang ran along the beach or that guy ran out of the house with his dear mother, I would get out of there. The last thing I want to mention before moving on are the strange, unique animals and creatures on Monty's map of New Guinea. Now don't take me wrong, unusual creatures are on all Monty-like lands, but Australia is often considered a land of unique wilderness with the most extraordinary and rare species in the world. Let's quickly look at what happened to the survivors of the Kingdom of Brasilia after the Little Ice Age, when the British and Europeans rediscovered it and fooled the natives there with their Christianity. 95% of the original inhabitants of New Guinea were massacred, raped, and enslaved during the massacres, which made me sick while gathering evidence for this documentary, and I won't repeat any of it. What did I find that rattled my body and soul? Especially this piece of shit that looks like it's from Jumanji. If there is a jaw I want to break, it's his. I'd like to see him grimace like that after, you evil bastard. And where did they take him? Probably to clear mud deposits in North America and then dig their own graves. The most shocking thing about New Guinea, which is today's Australia and New Zealand. This mainland of the Outer Ring, supposed to be part of the great imaginary ice wall, had fully built cities and infrastructure before the reset, before the Little Ice Age, the same infrastructure we see all over Australia today. And because this part of the ring of lands around us was built up and once inhabited by its builders, it is only logical to expect that all these lands will be built up with infrastructure. I have known this for some time, and I am still fascinated to think about these possibilities. Allow me to show you how these lands hide before your eyes. These are maritime routes. These are flight routes. These lands are hidden before us on their modern, distorted maps, but visible on the lunar chart, Monty's map, and other old world maps. As you see, maritime and air traffic perfectly avoid these hidden countries and provide more accurate flight times than their own distorted maps and their fake flat Earth maps. Back down to Antarctica. Is this what Antarctica really is? This little poop, a small island near South America, as I said, close to the official version, but the main lie lies in its size. It's not the seventh continent, it's a small island, a remnant of Tierra del Fuego. That dot right there is the Ross Ice Shelf, also known as the ice wall. Creepy, isn't it? How do we get past it? How do we get past that? We have to be trapped. Maybe in your mind, they brainwashed you to believe in the ice wall, for which there is absolutely no proof. Because when millions of people realized we don't live on a globe, that cult knew that our next step would be to go and see for ourselves. So they programmed everyone to believe in their ice wall that traps you in your mind, just like their globe before. It's really sad to see how effective their deception was. What else are you willing to believe without any proof? These islands are also part of Tierra del Fuego but are hidden on the cult's modern maps. The second mainland on Monty's map was completely destroyed and there are no traces left on the lunar map. Once our current and upcoming ice age ends, there will be nothing left down there at all. Gaelka was also decimated. On the lunar map, there is a faint line between these landmasses. I wish I could give you more than just my scribbles over Vibes' map, but I'm not very technical. If you have the technical skills to create a similar type of map as Vibes', but with my corrections, I would of course pay you for your services. Please contact me. So Galaxa is about the size of Canada, America, and Mexico combined. Look at the size of Lakesh. Them admitting Australia to us but not this and doing everything to hide it from us leads me to suspect that this is the mainland inhabited by the cult itself. I have gathered a dozen clues and hints that it is so, like this picture from inside Air Force One, President J.F. Kennedy's plane. Notice that map on the wall. And no, that's not Australia, that's Lakesh. It is highlighted in many old world cartographies. Lakesh has good weather, is easily and quickly accessible, and also this continent did not experience too much devastation during the Little Ice Age. We quickly went through New Guinea, Aka, Australia, New Zealand, and surrounding islands, but still look at all that land south of Australia. Let's move to Patali. This location was completely missing on Vibes' map. The scary thing is that in 1587 this continent was inhabited by a civilization described on Monty's map. And keep in mind, he was right about New Guinea's inhabitants, so it's likely he's right about the people from Patali as well. Less known, but this is what I have. Foreigners are not allowed to live in these countries. Everyone walks naked, so we see a certain trend and they are very white. The phrase very white disappears strangely when said by white Caucasians. In my research I found quite a few photos of people from New Guinea painting themselves white, and they did it to intimidate people and other tribes, or maybe they just had light skin. Let's move to what I call Vista 3. Remember, on Monty all these three continents were named Vista or Land of Vista, indicating some connection I have never managed to decipher. Maybe some of you can, but look at the size of that land. Our entire world's population could fit into this area 3 times, it's gigantic. And it is likely that this entire area is built up with old world infrastructure and may be inhabited. We have Vista 2, a collection of lands twice the size of Europe, and again I bet it's built up, and the last jewel is Vista 1, formerly known as Atlantis. Destroyed in ancient times but not drowned as the legends claim until the devastation during the Little Ice Age. Vibes apparently also found that Atlantis was down here, but as with most things in his sketch he wrongly labeled Vista 2 as Atlantis. Most Atlantis seekers are fantasy-led completely astray. As in any research, stick to facts and you will always reach the truth. Use logic. Atlantis, Atlantan, Atlantic Ocean. Now let's quickly return to the different architectural timelines. Now you're starting to understand the 4 different timelines. There are ways to prove that pre-reset people did not build that amazing ancient architecture. As Monty states, these outer lands were not yet well known then. Monty's map from 1587 was made at the end of the pre-reset era. 20 years later, the whole world went to hell. So we know these buildings were not created during the pre-reset period. We see them everywhere in places like Australia. The main mud floods happened between 1600 and 1700. Officially, it is claimed these Australian buildings were made only at the end of the 19th century, but they are all heavily flooded with mud. So either they built all those palaces and then decided to bury them in mud, or they were built before the floods. These buildings were clearly built before the reset, and even before the Little Ice Age. And we know these buildings were not built by the people from New Guinea or the Kingdom of Brasilia. Old world buildings all over Australia have the same style as buildings in England, France, Spain, and the rest of the world. It's impossible that the people of New Guinea built in exactly the same way, especially when they had no contact with the outside world. The people of New Guinea inherited this land and its infrastructure just like the rest of the world before the reset. Just like our time inherited what was left from the era before our reset. These buildings were built by people of ancient times and old world lines before their own extinction. It is clear that people of ancient times and old world lines inhabited all lands, including the outer ring of continents surrounding us. In Monty's time, people before our reset clearly had deeper knowledge of our world compared to our dumbed-down timeline. Humanity was never this stupid. Okay, before ice wall lovers start pointing at the lunar edge and shouting ice wall, I'll show you one miserable attempt I made. This black piece of paper represents our world. Everything we see on Monty's and Luna's maps. Around our known world I placed other sketches representing other continents beyond it. I have a round mirror here, it represents the reflection of our moon. It is not to scale at all, but that's okay, you will get the point. The camera represents our perspective looking up at the moon, and as it rotates the moon around our world, this is the reflection, our perspective. We see only a round reflection of the immediate land around us, but we don't see the whole black rectangular paper, just its small circular part. Does this prove the rectangle is actually a circle? No, because we can step back and know 100% there is more than that small circle we see from Earth's level. My logical mind offers only 2 possibilities. This circle is the edge of the known world, a barrier, maybe even an ice wall, beyond which is a closed entity. Or, as I said in my attempt, when you look in the mirror in the bathroom, do you see the reflection of the entire wall behind you or just a part of it? The fact these hidden lands exist raises further problems and questions. We know for sure our local moon and sun orbit and spiral around our north. But if this outer land is big enough for our world to fit in 3 times, it doesn't get warmth from our local sun, it must be dark and frozen. For now, it's only a theory until I prove it, and I will finally prove it because I am right. It would be a shame to create such a huge landmass and maybe others beyond it only for a small part to be habitable and accessible. It just doesn't make sense to me, and whenever something doesn't make sense, it's always because it's wrong. My soul resonates with truth and accepts information straight from the source, and I feel in my bones these lands are habitable. If this area didn't get warmth, land and oceans would be frozen. Between frozen land and sea there would be no distinguishing marks, and the moon's reflection would look more like this. But that is not what we see. We see separated land and liquid oceans, indicating heat and light. How could the moon reflect darkness and show land in such detail? The only logical explanation would be that this area has its own source of heat and light. Sun and moon are yin and yang. You can't have one without the other, and you can't have either without their energy source, magnetic north. My improved theory is that this land has its own sun and moon. Light, heat, energy source, and magnetic north. Once we get out of reach of our lunar map, another moon appears. Our moon and sun are not unique. I don't know how far that land extends before its inevitable closure, but after all, none of you know, and there are only 2 ways we can find out. Remove the veil and reclaim secret libraries and knowledge, or just go see for yourselves. I need help from truth seekers and content creators to help spread the information about this documentary, to bring research of truth back on the right path. I don't expect channels to share it because truth is against YouTube community rules and they would just delete your channel because of it. But you can spare 10 seconds of your time to promote it and show your followers where to find this documentary. I posted it on 17 different social networks and created my own website for it. The key to getting freedom and the world back is not violence, nor elections, nor standing outside with a cardboard sign. As their AI stated, truth threatens their power. Truth will free you all. Knowledge leads to enlightenment and higher vibrations. In this documentary, you glimpsed a flash of the power of frequency and vibrations. When the veil is lifted and the curtain drawn, it loses the psychological power they have over the masses, and we can banish these parasites from our world for good. We are the ones who have the real power. We can manifest a better world. I offer to take 9 to 11 brave, enlightened souls on the first expedition on 2 vessels. I will show you the reality of the world around you, and that cult can do nothing to stop me. I need a second captain for Sayorsa, 2 40-foot steel sailboats with cutter rigging. No details about the expedition will be disclosed until you are selected as crew. For the first voyage, I ask no women, no one younger than 25, no one with children under 18, and no one older than 60, and no one over 60, and I don't mean this disrespectfully. I will protect my crew and we will return safely, but sailing into uncharted, unknown waters has its risks. And I don't need the above complicating my job as captain. Every crew member must be prepared to spend 10 days aboard Sayorsa with me, my home, to try and learn the basics of sailing and navigation, and to complete an approximately 7-week round expedition. I will not be fooled, and I see into your windows and into your soul, so if you don't have it or have bad intentions towards me or my crew, I will see you. Parasites controlling and deceiving this world have no power over me. And the captain does like his time wasted by frauds. You can be a wolf in sheep's clothing, but I am a lion among lions. Watch out. I don't trust technology, but for now, if you want to contact me, use the address on the screen or the link below if this is an original post from a channel I own. For any future issues, I will add a postal mailbox address. Just beware of scammers. I would never ask any of you to do anything or give me anything. I will show you all your reality at my own expense. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for your time. Peace and love to you all.